Alessandro. Alessandro. Porque no está en directo, ¿no? No habrá puesto directo a las 4 directamente. Alessandro.
Juan.
Ah, ya estamos en directo. Okay.
I can see it. It's live on YouTube.
Yes, live.
Yeah.
Ok, buenas tardes a todos y todas desde la Escuela Española de Historia y Arqueología en Roma. Como muchos ya sabéis, las conferencias de Online Talks las organizamos con nuestros colegas Miriam Cubas, que hoy es la ponente de la Universidad de Alcalá, y Robson de la Universidad de York. Y dar las gracias a la dirección y los compañeros de la escuela, porque sin ellos esto no sería posible, especialmente hoy Alessandro Gatti, que está en la parte técnica. So, for introduce to Miriam Cuban, she focuses her research interest on material culture of prehistoric society, especially related to the origin and dispersal of the early pottery. Her research experience is interdisciplinary, combining archaeological field work and traditional artifact analysis, typology and technology, and archaeological science around the organic residues analysis. Since her PhD in 2010, she has accumulated a strong track record with more than 10 years of experience in different countries. For all people, you know, normally you can do your question by YouTube. And remember, all conference will be recorded also on YouTube too. Okay, thank you. You know, it's 45 minutes.
I know that. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank to the Escuela Española de Arqueología en Roma for offering us the required infrastructure to carry out this talk during the last 2 years. It has been an interesting experience that has allowed connecting researchers all around Europe. In addition, I would like to thank Juan Gibaja, currently based at the Escuela Española de Arqueología en Roma, and Harry Robson, based at the University of York, to support this initiative during these years. So in this context, I'm more than happy to offer this last talk, titled Culinary Practices During the Early Neolithic in Iberia, an approach from organic residue analysis, in which I summarize all the information regarding the subsistence and consumption patterns obtained from organic residue analysis from archaeological pottery date to the Neolithic period, or mainly to the early Neolithic period in Iberia. So considering the different geographical areas, the Neolithic concept has different implications. Since the beginning of the concept, at the end of the 19th century, this process was linked to a technological change related to the spread of pottery technology and polished stone. After that, several aspects related to dynamic population and economic change were explored. Currently, the Neolithic concept involves a broad diversity of aspects from population dynamics, settlement patterns, new subsistence practices, technological modification, social and ritual transformations, and other different things. So, however, attribution to the Neolithic of one specific archaeological site depends on the geographical area under study. In some cases, the apparition of pottery is the only aspect considered, creating a complex scenario in which the Neolithic evolves different cultural realities. As all we know, the spread of the Neolithic in Europe is one of the most important issues in prehistory. Its introduction in the continent followed different dynamics in its geographical area, following very complex phenomena carried out in different chronologies. In this context, the Iberian Peninsula constitutes one of the western parts of the European continent, and it presents some difference from the rest of the continent. The geographical situation of the Iberian Peninsula in the southeast of the continent converts it into a confluence area in which we can observe Mediterranean and the Atlantic influence in different factors: environment, vegetation, climate, Without any doubt, this specific condition affected the different societies that have occupied the territory. Along the prehistory, we can observe different population patterns and strategies in both coastal sites, which affect the dynamics of these societies. The Iberian Peninsula constitutes an ideal geographical area for studying the impact of the new farming system, that the newly introduced farming system had on indigenous hunter-gatherer societies. It comprises a great variability of landscape, which at the same time are linked with a particular geographical position in the southwest of Europe, reflecting an influence of the Mediterranean region in the east coast and open to the Atlantic Ocean in the west coast. However, the analysis of the radiocarbon dates reflect a complex scenario for the neolithization processes, showing an early chronology in the east of Iberia, especially all along the Mediterranean coast. Indeed, some of the most traditional areas in the study of the Mesolithic in Europe are located in the Iberian Peninsula, such as the Cantabrian region and the Atlantic area of Portugal. However, recent research carried out in other areas have revelated a considerable number of Mesolithic sites in the Mediterranean coast. Most of the researchers consider that the Mesolithic started around 9,000 KL BC. Most of the sites recorded in the Iberian Peninsula may be related to the late Mesolithic around the 6,000 KL BC. The Atlantic Mesolithic of the Iberian Peninsula is characterized by a very specific kind of archaeological site, the shell middens, located in caves and open-air sites, showing an exploitation of marine resources, especially marine shells. The material culture in these sites is frequently elaborated in flint, with a tendency to the microlithism. However, in the north of Spain, the traditional lithic tools associated to these sites are the picos asturienses, a macrolithic tool frequently linked to the exploitation of marine shells. In addition to the traditional areas for the study of the Mesolithic in the Iberian Peninsula, at the end of the 20th century, new sites in the Mediterranean coast have been well analyzed. Although traditionally the researchers have considered that the main characteristic of the Mesolithic in the Atlantic coast is the recording of individual burials, during the last year, this kind of phenomenon has been recorded also in the Mediterranean coast. In the Atlantic coast, considering just the complete burials, the archaeological site dates in the Mesolithic are more than 150 individuals. In some cases, they can be considered real cemeteries, such as Cabezo das Amoreiras in Portugal or Los Canes in Spain. In most of the cases, there are single burials with both male and female individuals in different positions and with different grave goods. In some cases, these burials are located in shell middles, such as in Sado and Tagus Valley, and in some examples in the north of the Iberian Peninsula. Although there are examples of burial not related to the shell middles in the same chronology. In general, the radiocarbon dates available show a concentration of these archaeological sites during the late Mesolithic. As we mentioned before, during the last years, new Mesolithic burials have been recorded in the Mediterranean coast. Sites such as Masnou and El Collado are now well known in the bibliography about Mesolithic in Iberia. The current archaeological evidence about Mesolithic in Iberia allows us to have a good knowledge about the funerary practices during the Mesolithic, but we have less information about the settlement patterns and the dwelling structure linked to these societies. Given the high number of Mesolithic burials, the molecular techniques have been systematically applied to this kind of archaeological evidence, especially the stable isotopes of carbon and nitrogen, to reconstruct the diet of this population. The data available for the Mesolithic come from 21 archaeological sites, both from the Mediterranean and Atlantic coast. These analyses have been done from burials and isolated burial human remains, especially from the Atlantic coast of Portugal, the Cantabrian region of Spain, and of course, the Mediterranean coast. These results show a high diversity on diet and subsistence practices in the previous moment of the introduction of the first domesticates in the Iberian Peninsula. So the first domesticated evidence of both cattle and crops are recorded in Iberia at the beginning of the 6th millennium Cal BC. Currently, the oldest dates for the early Neolithic evidence have been recorded in the Mediterranean, including domestic crops, animals, and the early impressed pottery vessels. However, the chronology of this phenomenon is not probable in all the Iberia, showing a delay in the Atlantic coast and the Cantabrian region in comparison with the Mediterranean and the Ebro Valley. This aspect has allowed recently to reinforce the model of coastal expansion of the Neolithic along the coast of the Iberian Peninsula, the maritime pioneers' colonization, with different processes of interaction with the Mesolithic and the new populations from Near East. However, other possible scenarios, such as an influence of the north of Africa in the Neolithization processes, has been proposed. Currently, the evidence in the north of Africa is so scarce that it not allow us to evaluate this aspect. Considering the funerary evidence from the early to the late Neolithic, we can see a high number of burials date to the Middle Neolithic, especially in the geographical area of Catalonia. Just 10% of the burials are dated to the early Neolithic, showing the scarcity of this kind of archaeological sites in the Iberian Peninsula. At the same time, we can observe a concentration of this evidence in the coastal areas without any site in the island. During the early Neolithic, the diet is focused mainly in terrestrial resources in all areas, with a very, very small component of marine resources and without any evidence of freshwater commodities. The isotopic data reflect a restriction of the diet in terrestrial resources. However, the exploitation of these resources is well recorded also in Mesolithic. Indeed, we should highlight that the regional tendency observed during the Mesolithic is less obvious, although the number of samples is clearly less. Another kind of evidence to reconstruct the diet of ancient populations during the Neolithic in the Iberian Peninsula is organic residue analysis of archaeological core. There are several types of organic residues. The first kind of evidence include the organic molecules deposited in an organic matrix formed by human activities. In addition, this organic residue analysis include also those anthropic transformation of natural products that are not directly deposited in a clay matrix, and they require really good condition of preservation. This kind of analysis allows us to reconstruct the cuisine practices of the population that use this technology to process the food in the past. However, we should have in mind that this kind of analysis only reflect the resources processed in the pots. Organic residue analysis aims to analyze the lipids preserved in the archaeological pots. Organic residue are formed both by culinary, preparation, cooking, storage, or transportation, and non-culinary activities, preparing, surface treatment of the pots, or other kind of technological activities. In this sense, organic residue analysis provides direct evidence of the potter's use life. Organic residue analysis of archaeological pottery is mainly focused on the extraction and interpretation of biomolecules, especially the lipids. Although under other specific conditions, Proteins and other biomolecules can also be recorded. Lipids and the main biomolecules recovered from absorbed residues in archaeological pottery, including fats, oil, waxes, bituminous substances, and resins. The ecological and the positional contexts are critical for the preservation and interpretation of these organic residues. The organic residue analysis aims to analyze the lipids preserved in the ecological pots. So to carry out this analysis is necessary, first of all, to extract the lipids preserved in the vessels. Normally, from 1 grain of pottery powder and following different procedures of extraction, lipids or solvent extraction, we manage to recover the lipids preserved in the pots. After that, the analysis by gas chromatography and mass spectrometry allow us to make the molecular identification of the main compounds preserved in the pottery. Finally, the gas chromatography combustion isotopic radio mass spectrometry allows to distinguish the origin of these compounds based on their stable carbon isotope signature. The interpretation of the organic residue analysis uses 2 main information resources. The molecular data allows us to identify the name of the different molecular components and to correlate them with different food resources. Different food resources can be identified through specific molecular components, ecological biomarkers. On the other hand, the isotopic signal of single compounds fatty acids allow us to make an approach to the food sources which are processing in the pot. The GCCMS allow us to measure the values of the isotope C13 in the main fatty acids preserved in the pots. Normally, we use the palmitic and stearic fatty acid due to they are the best preserved in the ecological pottery. The comparison of these isotopic values with the reference values of modern resources allow us to make an approach to the food processing in the pots. So following this approach, we can distinguish different food commodities from animal fats, plant oils, cereals, marine oils, beeswax and honey, and resins. However, there are other products difficult to identify, such as the fermented products, wine or beer, whose are, without any doubt, the challenge of organic residue analysis in the following years. In this context, analysis of early pottery evidence on Iberia allows carry out the reconstruction of culinary practices in this important transition to the Neolithic. These kind of techniques have been applied in several sites located in the Mediterranean coast, in the Mediterranean basin. This analysis have been applied to all a different kind of archaeological sites. And, from a date mainly from the 6th millennium Calvici in all this area. Systematic studies focus on organic residue analysis of the first archaeological sites in the Mediterranean have been carried out. These paradigmatic sites include some sites in the Iberian Peninsula, such as Cansadurní or La Draga, and in all cases reflect the importance of this early pottery in the Mediterranean that was mainly used for meat processing. So this analysis have been applied to pottery assemblages recorded in the northeast of the Iberian Peninsula, such as Caserna San Pau, Carrer de Reina Amalia, San Lloret, Les Guiserras, or La Draga site. Has been also applied to some sites in the Ebro Valley, such as, for example, Cova del Vidri, Los Pirineos, Coro Transito, or northwest of Iberia and southwest. The main results obtained in the northeast of Iberia shows the general trend observed in the Mediterranean. basin, with a high number of vessels used in the processing of meat, especially of ruminant animals, and non-ruminant in some cases. Most of the pots analyzed reflect this general trend in all the Mediterranean basin, including the Iberian Peninsula. It is relevant to highlight a possible modification in pottery use between the Cardiac and the Epicardial Neolithic, with a relatively high presence of dairy products in the second one. This tendency observed in a scarce number of pots related to the processing of dairy product is also observed in the rest of the Mediterranean basin, where milk and other dairy products are well recorded since the beginning of the Neolithic in a very, very low number of samples. On the south of the Mediterranean coast, available data point out the use of some pots in the processing of non-ruminant and ruminant meat without any evidence of dairy products. This meat processing in the pots is complemented with plant evidence in some of the analyzed sherds, especially one specific site, La Cueva del Toro in Andalusia. Scarce information is available for the inland of the Iberian Peninsula and has been obtained mainly from El Portalón de Cueva Mayor in Atapuerca, where 5 samples from the early Neolithic layers has been analyzed. This data reflect also the processing of ruminant fats with an insignificant presence of dairy products. Currently, a lot of information is available in the Atlantic coast of Iberia, where the expansion and consolidation of farming is slightly delayed compared to other areas. In general, all the Atlantic coast from Portugal to the Cantabrian coast is characterized by a low preservation of organic material. Organic residue analysis is available for 9 archaeological sites located all along the Atlantic coast. They correspond to different kinds of archaeological sites, open-air sites, cave, even megalithic structure, or even sand meadows. Given the coastal character of most of the sites, we apply a specific method for exploring the aquatic biomarkers in our samples. This method allows us to highlight the isoprenoid and alkylphenylalkanoic acid considered the main evidence of the aquatic products in the samples. The identification of aquatic biomarkers is relatively frequent in pottery from the North Sea, Japan, Russia, or Alaska. However, the presence of these aquatic biomarkers has not been identified in any sample recorded in the Atlantic coast of Iberia. Molecular data are consistent with degraded animal fats in the majority of cases, especially the distribution of the fatty acid, relatively high amounts of stearic acid, the presence of cholesterol, and the presence of mid-chain ketones and triacylglycerols. In addition, the plot of the isotopic values of the main fatty acid obtained from samples from Portugal reflect the scarce isotopic values related to ruminant dairy and the importance of the processing of terrestrial animals, especially ruminant adipose fats. Although the processing of non-ruminant animals is also recorded. In the same way, the plot of these values for Spain, for the Cantabrian region of Spain, reflect the importance of processing ruminant adipose. However, as well as the data available for Portugal, The ruminant products are the main contribution in the pots analyzed and date to the early Neolithic, with a very, very low number of samples showing the exploitation of non-ruminant adipose products. However, in the later region, we can observe a high number of samples with an isotopic signature showing a mixture between dairy products and ruminant adipose fats, clearly higher than in Portugal. If we compare this data with the Atlantic coast of Europe, there is a significant latitudinal gradient in the isotopic values, from the Iberian Peninsula to Scotland, with a greater proportion from higher latitude containing dairy products. Stable carbon isotopes values, typical of marinoids, have been recorded in this area. All along the Atlantic coast of Europe, there is no presence of these values. Just in the Western Baltic, there are some samples whose values correspond to the presence of aquatic lipids biomarkers in the vessels. In contrast, there is no evidence for aquatic, in any of the analyzed vessels from sites located all along the South Atlantic coast of Europe. If we compare the available data for the coast of Europe, we can observe a latitudinal gradient in the increased number of pots related to dairy products. Processing showing a really high proportion in the Atlantic coast of France and, of course, in the United Kingdom. So the main difference is mainly based on the presence of dairy products among the early pottery in the north latitudes. But which are the reasons for this difference? Our results show differences in the use and management of terrestrial animal products from the south to the north of the Atlantic coast of Europe and the absence of marine resources except in this Baltic region. They also provide valuable insights into animal exploitation in regions such as the south of the Atlantic coast, where the early Neolithic fauna remains are very poorly preserved due to the underlying acidic soils. Neolithic faunal data shows that oricaprines tend to dominate Iberian assemblages, where cattle were more important in France, the United Kingdom, and of course, the north of the Iceland. Based on the increased proportion of dairy residues associated with pottery from higher latitude, we propose that intensive dairying is closely linked with cattle-based economies, while sheep and goats were exploited for both their meat and milk, at least in initial phases of the Neolithic. If we compare early Neolithic assemblages across Atlantic Europe, defined by the first centuries following the appearance of pottery and domesticated animals, the sampling transect spanned circa 1,500 years and follow the dispersal of farming, which appeared circa 5,400, 5,300 Calvici in the south, and 3,700 Calvici in the north. Therefore, the frequency of dairy residues in pottery is also correlated with the date that domesticated were introduced in a given area. Our study highlights that when the Neolithic arrived to different regions along the Atlantic Europe, there were different regional responses. However, the frequency of dairy versus other terrestrial animal fats in pottery was strongly influenced by latitude. So the adoption of pottery technology is massively related to terrestrial animal processing, probably linked to the new subsistence practices related to the spread of farming and livestock. The identification of milk and dairy products have important advantages for human diet due to both are important resources of fat and D vitamin. Recently, other authors have proposed have support that this high proportion of dairy products consumption in the north of Europe might be related to famine and other diseases. So, to summarize all the information available about the Iberian Peninsula, I would like to point out 5 different points. Adoption of pottery in Iberia is massively related to terrestrial animal processing, mainly ruminant animals and porcine. And we can assume, based on the faunal composition of the faunal assemblages that are recorded in the archaeological site, are mainly domesticated animals, mainly ovicaprine. Also, there is a scarce evidence of plant processing in the pots without any citation of cereal biomarkers. So it's a new line of research that we have to improve and we have to explore just to try to identify the early cereal processing in these pots. Given the coastal characters of most of the archaeological sites in the early Neolithic and some of them in the middle and late Neolithic, the use of pottery in this area is not related to the processing of aquatic products. Even if some aquatic remains, such as shells or fish remains, are well recorded in the archaeological record. So even if this Neolithic population are eating or has some protein marine input in their diet, there is no evidence of processing of aquatic products in the pots. And the other important point of the use of this early pottery in the Atlantic, in the Iberian Peninsula, is that the presence of dairy products is higher in the north, especially in the Cantabrian region, according to the general scenario that we can observe in Europe. So the first, or the early pottery in the Iberian Peninsula, saw that the spread of the technology, of pottery technology, is clearly linked to the new subsistence practices, farming and livestock. So I hope this talk will be interesting. So if you have any question, just let me know, and I will try to summarize some more data. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Miriam.
Thank you, Harry.
Very nice and clear. Nice to see your data integrated with these other recently published studies, which I wasn't aware of. This, is it Brew,
Adrian, yeah.
They seem to have published 2 or 3 articles. I was having a look online, which I'm sure will be of use and interest and good for further comparison. So the question I've got, which you might not be able to answer, is...
well, thank you. Thank you, Harry, for this.
It was actually based on the other study. The differences in the cardial and epicardial wears, is that... Obviously, they're both cultures, but are what are the main differences between the 2 groups, and how would you explain those differences in the pottery use?
Yes, the main difference is a slightly high proportion of dairy evidence in the epicardial period. That it makes sense because the epicardial is later than the cardial period. So it's assumed that pottery use is more related with a consolidation of livestock. So that could be related with the later chronology that we can find in the Atlantic. So it's quite interesting because the oldest pottery assemblages in the Iberian Peninsula are related with this processing of meat, mainly ruminant animals. But when the consolidation of the livestock is more established in the Iberian Peninsula, the dairy proportion is higher, and that correlates quite well with the, with the late early Neolithic that we have in the Atlantic.
Mm.
So it could be, a spread not only of pottery technology but also in pottery use.
So there does seem to be quite a clear temporal change throughout the Neolithic as well.
Yeah, it seems. It's not sure because the samples are not, super high. So we need to improve the number of samples and we need to improve the chronology also. But I think it's a quite a strong hypothesis to test in the following years.
Mm. Okay, and I've got another question which was based on your presentation. So, in one of your charts at the start, you had a pie chart which was showing the numbers of Neolithic burials according to phase, and you were suggesting, or at least stating, that the early Neolithic burials were quite low in comparison with either the late Mesolithic and the Middle Neolithic. Do you think that's a reflection not necessarily of taphonomy or preservation or recovery biases, but do you think it might well just be a reflection of the archaeology, as in you have these small groups of farmers who are encroaching into these hunter-gatherer territories, and because there's so few by number, that they're just, the burials are reflected in those numbers? Or do you think it's something else?
Yeah, I think it's not a problem of research, because we have made quite a strong research on Neo-Meso and Neo-transition in Iberia, as you well know. And the Mesolithic is quite well recorded, and the Middle Neolithic in Catalonia especially also. So I think it's not a problem of research.
Mm.
I think it's more related with the settlement pattern, because, most of the researchers will focus our attention in this early Neolithic looking for the transition. But in reality, we can see the mix, between the Mesolithic population and the Neolithic population in the Middle Neolithic. So probably the settlement patterns of the early Neolithic, small groups, no sedentaries, probably living, in a very sporadic sites, is not the perfect, settlement pattern for preservation of burials. So I think it's more related with that. Because after in the Middle Neolithic, we can see the mix, between this some Mesolithic tradition and some Neolithic traditions. So I think maybe we should focus our attention in a long diachronic process, not just in half millennia. So looking for a long diachronic process in 1.5 millennia, maybe between the end of the 6th and the end of the 5th millennia BC. I think that could be a new approach to follow.
Mm. Okay, thanks. Rita has a question. She says, Miriam, have you noticed any differences between mortuary and settlement sites in the use of pottery?
Yeah, not at all, because the burial sites are really, really low in number. So even if I try, because I select samples from caves with burials, as Caldeirão in Portugal, I don't have a lot of funerary sites because the evidence is not really high. But apparently there is no difference. But I have to say that there is a bias, in the selection of samples, because most of the samples that we analyze, all the researchers in Iberia, came from settlements. So they reflect the daily life, not the burial practices.
Mm.
So a good exercise for us, I think, would be to analyze the samples linked to the megalithic structures, because they reflect perfectly the funerary practices in the Neolithic, even if they reflect the funerary practices in the fourth millennia. So, you know, my ideas, as you well know, are now this long diachronic perspective to explore the funerary use of pottery in these megalithic structures.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's something we're interested in doing in the, let's say, the Western and Eastern Baltic as well.
Yeah.
But at least from it's similar to what we've got though. Further east we go, as in there doesn't seem to be a change in the use of, or at least specific ingredients and or foodstuffs are found in funerary vessels. Yeah. They seem to be very, you know, homogeneous in some respects with the settlement sites. But of course, yeah, further research is required, 100%. And I think a good, you know, super regional study encompassing, well, it could be done for the entire European continent, really, you know, looking at pottery and megalithic burials or megalithic sites, or at least funerary contexts. Yeah. Whereas the only issue will be the low number of sheds.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Well, it needs to be done. It'll be awesome. Really,
yeah, I know, and you well know that to work with these big databases is quite complicated, because you have a lot of data following different processes, different analytical processes. So you have to standardize all the information. So you need a lot of time just to build up the database. But I think it's a quite interesting exercise, because you can propose new hypotheses, even something to discuss, because if not, it's always more or less the same. So these big approaches to try to draw new scenarios, to propose new hypotheses are required. And I really, really believe, if I can say that in science, that this long perspective is necessary, because we just focus on the Mesolithic, Early Neolithic transition, but of course the Middle and the Late Neolithic has a lot of things to say about that.
And into the Bronze Age as well.
Yeah, of course.
You know, great. Maria says excellent talk, so
thank you.
But nobody else any further questions? Do you have any questions, Juan?
Yes, first, congratulations, Miriam.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, but I think her studies of the analysis of Miriam in Spain is a revolution, because all people, when we come to the Congress, all people speak around the morphology of the pottery, the culture, but is Miriam when come to the Congress playing the pottery as tool is very important for different perspectives, no? For me, it's a revolution, the studies of Miriam in Iberia, and well, for this congratulations. And I have only a I have a big reflection around the transition, no? But for the conference, I have only one single question around the different presence of dyeing fast in pottery. All recipes, all recipientes, okay,
yes,
the morphology is more or less the same, because depend of the pottery, you know, of the vessel. Is it a big vessel or medium vessels? It's for compare, no? This is the question. I don't know. Is the comparison is with a more or less same vessels?
Yeah, I have to say that it's difficult to say, because in the Atlantic area, in the Atlantic coast, we don't have a lot of vessels. We are mainly working with sherds. So our analytical base unit is mainly the shared, because we cannot reconstruct morphologies. But in the Mediterranean coast, they are quite lucky, because they have all these beautiful decoration patterns and they have some morphologies. But most of the morphologies are quite different. The volume that they can support is not always the same. So we have big, medium, and small vessels. Instead, in Atlantic, we don't have a lot of information about morphology because it's impossible to reconstruct because the pottery assemblages are not really high, but we have some information about the technology. And we work a lot on that, and I discuss a lot this aspect with Harry, because what was one of my main hypotheses, a correlation between technological aspect and the use of the pottery. And we explore the different correlation, the use of different tempers with the use of the pottery for cooking, with the use of different technological choices, tempers, frying. We cannot find anything. So we know that they are using different tempers. They are using grog, they are using organic temper, they are using calcite, but there is no correlation with the technological features and the use of the pots. So I hope this could be something related with the sampling, because now in the Iberian Peninsula, we have something like 900 sherds analyzed in total. So it's not a huge number of samples, and not all of them has technological data. So I hope it's something related with the data that we have. But it's something that I usually explore, because it's one of the things I really would like to see, these technological trends related to the use of the pots.
Mm-hmm. True. All right, I've got two more questions. I've got another one. I was thinking, having looked at these plots as well, because I've just opened up Cynthia's 2016 paper, which is obviously very influential and useful as well as a huge intra-regional study. And has anybody done any analysis on Northern Africa to compare with the Iberian Peninsula? Because at least from the plots, these maps, they're showing the cardial and epicardial has at least an influence on North Africa. So,
yeah, there are some studies in North Africa by Dunn and Everset group in Bristol, but they are not from the coastal sites. So one of the things we are trying to analyze are these sites, close to Ceuta, that is exactly in Gibraltar trade, to see if there is a tendency from the south to the north. Even there is a quite interesting site in a small island in the Gibraltar trade that is called, in the Islas Chafarinas Island, that is called Zafrin, where fieldwork was done around 2000 or something like that, and they had some beautiful cardial vessels. So it's something that I'm trying to do, and I'm looking for someone to do that, because I think that is super interesting. Because the geographical position of Iberia is perfect to have the influence of the North Mediterranean and South Mediterranean through Gibraltar, and of course the central Neolithization processes also through the Pyrenees. So to explore different trends or different influences in Iberia it's super interesting also.
Okay. Awesome. And Julia has another question saying, great talk, thanks Miriam. Have there been any sites which have been studied in more detail on an intra-site level, such as specific spaces within a site used for specific food processing? I can't think of any, except for obviously the study on Durrington Walls.
Yeah.
I can't think of any further studies unless you are aware or have done it yourself.
No, as you well know, I work with Neolithic pottery, but it was published last year, a study by Marta Frances, made a study from El Portalón de Atapuerca with samples from the Neolithic to the Bronze Age. showing this long diachrony with a different number of samples from the Neolithic, Chalcolithic, pre-Belviker, Chalcolithic, Belviker period, and after the Bronze Age. And they Marta proposed a tendency or a modification in the commodities processed in the pots, with an increased number of dairy products. Even in Iberia, during the Chalcolithic, this pots vessels related to cheese making appears. So that could be another evidence of the increase of these dairy products, you know, in later chronologies.
Okay. Thanks, Miriam. Perhaps you can put the link up on the YouTube chat.
Okay. Okay.
Brilliant.
So, thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you ever so much. And yeah, I think that's the end of the online series for the time being. So yeah, thanks to everybody who's tuned in and listened throughout the years. And yeah, we really appreciate it. And hopefully the series has been of interest and useful as well. So yeah, it's been great working with you two on it.
Yeah.
Juan, Miriam, final comments?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of final comments. I really enjoyed this seminar talk, you know, because it was really interesting to have all these questions in these 2 years and to think just on this beautiful period, you know, that is crucial for the humankind. That, of course, our research is focused on Neolithic, so it's always a pleasure to speak about that. So thank you everyone for contributing to this seminar, and thank you all our listeners on the YouTube channel. And of course, if you have any question in any moment, just let us know and we will try to answer it. So thank you so much for following us during almost 2 years.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Thank you very much. See you soon. Cheers.
Cheers. Ciao.